Everybody, welcome to Event Marketing Redefined. Thank you so much for being here. Today, cool show, right? We are doing Global Event Marketing Exec Panel, and we are going to be talking about 2024 programs. We are going to be talking about career goals. We are going to be talking about everything from a little bit of struggles to the joy to the strategy of being an event marketer and the career of an event marketer. So I will go on my box here this way, left. So we have Nancy Touhill with us, right? Nancy is with LexisNexis Risk Solutions. I have Tavar James. Tavar is with Riskified. And then we have Jon Wolff. Jon is with Lenovo. The three of you, welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Happy to be here. Happy to be back, man.
So, all right, let's get going. So first, we're going to break this up into parts. The first part is going to be, what are you focusing on going into 2024? And what are essentially challenges as well that go into that year's program? Jon, you and I spoke just like we all spoke previously, but you said something interesting, and you said understanding where the customer is and tiering a portfolio. I love that you said that, because I love the concept of really knowing where your customer is, meeting them, the convenience being where they're at, right? And then also, I think tiering a portfolio is an interesting topic amongst your all's world. So just give me a little bit on that, Jon, and kind of what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, so I think the biggest thing that we're focusing on for 2024 is obviously the changing circumstances, the shifting audience expectations. Where are they going? Where do we go to meet them? You know, we're used to the large industry events or these more internal events. Gone are the days of people were just going to an event to go there. They're being more selective on which one they are going to, from going to an event to get more industry awareness or kind of see what is happening with the latest gadgets and gizmos. And so that's kind of what we've done to shift our strategy, where we know there's still a need for the large industry events, but then there's also a need for these more, VIP account-based events. And so that's kind of where, as we shift to 2024, it's let's keep doing what we're doing, but let's refine and kind of cover the funnel from large down to mid and small, and really have that opportunity to meet the customer in their hometown, regionally and then globally.
So Jon, is a little bit of that essentially separating the fact that you've had internal events versus like more consumer events? Is that one part of it? And then is the second part trying to find more, I agree with you. Like, people are being more picky about where they go and why, and essentially what is the why for that attendee being there, yep. Right? Why are they there? So that's probably the second piece for you guys, is finding more intimate, smaller events. Are those two pieces correct, what you said?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, we have to, again, keep going to the larger events that we have been going to, because again, if the competition says, well, Lenovo isn't there, are they seeing reduction in work or layoffs? And so it's kind of we need to keep going to the ones that we've been going to just to show up and be present. And then at the same time, going back to the smaller events, making sure that we are ultimately having conversations with our partners, our key customers, that we can have more of that intimate setting versus, hey, we're showing up at this event, we have a booth, we have presentations, kind of casting the net and kind of focusing on that mid funnel.
Jon, when you had mentioned tiering a portfolio, walk through either people here who don't know what it is or people who do, but just, kind of your take on what you're trying to do there.
Yeah. So it's really, again, looking at the overall strategy. The tiering is what I just mentioned, the large industry events. So our traditional bigger events. Then as we kind of work to see, are they going to these other events that we should be going to? That's kind of the mid tier. And then certainly back to the VIP, the smaller ones, we're inviting key customers, 20 to 30 individuals for an intimate discussion that we know are more decision makers. And that tiered approach allows us to capture the audience, move individuals across the customer journey from awareness to more consideration.
Nice. Nancy, when we had spoke, you had mentioned that you had implemented a tier system, correct? Any insight on that from you? Maybe kind of what you've done, or like a different view on that? Anything?
Yeah, so we did implement a tiered system for 2023 that we're going to roll into 2024. And we look at it slightly differently than John does. So our tiers mainly help us focus on how we allocate budget, how we allocate resources, and how we, and the amount of effort, for lack of a better word, that goes into it. So we'll get into this, I think, later, but we also run a really lean team. There's 3 of us on the events team. And so our tier 1 events, we know that an events person will travel to it, a marketing person will travel to it. We go all in for tier 1 events. Tier 2, we still give them a lot of dedicated resource and time, but not quite as much. And then tier 3, we provide a lot of support on the back end, but certainly don't travel to them. So our tiers are to help kind of manage our team better and, understand where the kind of what the travel is going to look like for the year, and where we're going to really invest a lot of staff resources. So similar, but different.
Awesome. Tavar, you said something in the onboarding, we'll move off the tier a portfolio piece here. You had said you were retraining your team to think creatively and strategically to stretch a dollar. I thought that was such a cool statement, to be talking about the way people are thinking and kind of all working together, right, towards a goal. So just elaborate on that for us in terms of maybe a little bit of a change that you're trying to make with your team.
Yeah, I mean, we've all been faced with the challenge of doing more with less. And so what we try to do, not only myself, but, my team and then our sales leaders, is we're looking at the opportunities that we have within a business year, and we're trying to make sure that we're maximizing every opportunity possible. And so when I say we're retraining ourselves to think a little bit more creatively, when we think about those, tier 1 third party conferences where we're doing the big booth and the branding and all the, hoopla, we start to ask ourselves, is that really the best use of our dollar? And we start to ask those questions based off of the data that we have available to us. So we're being very, very intentional in 2024 and saying, listen, we can invest a 6-figure amount into this third party conference, but if we do that, what are we getting in return based off of what we've done in the past? And so we're looking at history, we're looking at trends. And to be honest with you, my team and our sales leaders have made some tough decisions going into 2024 about third-party events that we will not be participating in at that level next year, because we're finding that that same amount of money, we can do more across multiple experiences, across multiple events, and get more of a return. So that's what I mean by I'm training my team, and not only just my team, the field marketing team, but also training our stakeholders to think differently. And, it's been working. I think, I have one of my sales leaders in one of our regions that actually came to me when we were doing budget planning for next year to say, hey, I know that we typically invest X amount of dollars into this trade show. Do you mind if we, not invested in that trade show and instead spread it across several different events throughout the year? I think that's going to show more return. And it does show more return. So it's working. That new frame of mind is working. And it's actually great when you have your stakeholders actually coming to you and thinking the way that you're thinking as well. So, yeah.
I enjoy hearing you say that and sort of the way you broke that down, right? For a couple of reasons. I think one is the do more with less, in my opinion, just as a business owner who runs my own business, is a mentality, right? I think there's a ledge on that where you under-resource people to a degree, right? But there's also, that is a mentality of saying, hey, what are these efforts and these energies creating? Right? What are we really producing? And I think that's the question that you're asking yourself. And now you're kind of like permeating that down to your team to say, hey, if, they may be more in the weeds than you are, or in a little more day-to-day of a different thing, and saying, hey, I'm trying to get you to think this way. I think ultimately that is absolute gold. It's an investment into your team. And I think that will pay tenfold there. John, go ahead.
I was going to just say, like, for what we did, we had an event in London back in June. We got back with the team and decided, is this really worth, based off the audience, our investment? And we cut it 2 weeks later. I mean, it was good for us to be there to get awareness, but we right there saw it wasn't beneficial if we didn't have internal stakeholders behind us. And to kind of further on the data point you just made, was we are actually going through a portfolio revamp now where we're having conversations with internal stakeholders. We just wrapped up phase one of that, where it was a deep dive to have conversations with our leaders, from global executives down to marketing managers, where it was, what's been working, what hasn't, how do we shift the mindset so that we can really do more, do less, do more with less, but also look at the data and have the data speak to whether we do this versus, well, the quantitative. I think this works for us. Like, what are the hard facts that we can leverage in our strategy to make sure that we're being adaptive and identifying the right events?
And if I can add, I think a question that a lot of leaders, like all of us on this call, are asking ourselves nowadays, especially going into the future, is what does awareness mean? Like, saying I want to go to a trade show for awareness, I want to go for brand representation. Like, what does that mean? Back in the day, I think that meant something different. You needed to be there. Your brand needed to be there. You needed to have exposure. If your competitors were there, you had to be there. I think it's a different day and age where like awareness is not what it used to be. And so I'm pretty sure that I can speak for everyone on this call in saying that we're all having to ask ourselves, when one of our sales reps comes to us and says, no, we got to be there. We have to be there for awareness. What do you mean? What is awareness? What is exactly does that mean to you? So I challenge everyone who's listening to start asking those hard questions about awareness, brand representation, brand awareness. Like, what does that mean today? Because it has changed.
And even setting the KPIs and objectives, like awareness, is it lead generation? Is it conversations?
Right, exactly. Yep.
Because we get all the time, I want to be at this event. Well, what's the data to support that? Because we can provide and certainly help from a bandwidth and resource perspective. But if we're just going on a whim, just because you have a great feeling about this, we're setting ourselves up for failure.
Right.
Nancy, you were all a small team, like you mentioned earlier. So what kind of thoughts do you have on the, doing less with more?
Yeah, we are a small team, and both Jon and Tavar have brought up some really good points. But you have to look at the data, you have to look at the results from an event, and the answer to the question, why are you attending, can never be because we've always attended. Like, that's just not an acceptable answer anymore. I think maybe at one point in time it was, but it is no longer, because you invest such a significant amount of money and time and resources into these events. So you do have to look at the data. We're a data and analytics company, so data is our love language. And we, analyze every piece of data. And we also invite feedback. We invite as honest of feedback as people are willing to give us. And we use that to really look at the strategy moving forward. So it's important to understand the why behind the event. And, to Tavar's point, what does brand awareness really mean? If that's your why, then talk a little bit more about that. Understand your why, and then we'll be there with you every step of the way. But there has to be a reason behind it.
I think there was a couple of things there. One, Jon, when you touched on like qualitative and quantitative and that data, right? Like, I think understanding the split in those two and being able to get to just some hard facts, right? Because I think there's a lot of ways qualitatively to say, hey, this was good, or hey, we feel like this is good. The idea of attending the event, it's almost like FOMO some people have. They just think that they have to be there. But Nancy, with what you said, it's so, and I believe you said this, there's three of you, so if I lose a little track, but so much effort, so much time, so much strategy, so much thinking goes into putting on these experiences. Being dialed and on the money about where you're at and why you are there, I think is so key and such a good point. And then the idea of brand awareness, Tavar, what does that really mean? To be honest with you, it's something that I've been asking myself from all these shows and thinking, what is the impact? What are we really measuring? What are we looking to gain? For example, I posted something, and I'm not going to go long on this. The other day, I went to a tailgate for a football game, big college football game, and the Boston Beer Company, Twisted Tea, threw a huge tailgate. Huge. I mean, it was massive. It was so much fun. And as a football fan, like, I had a blast, and I didn't really know it was weird because I didn't produce it. Right. So I was just there. I mean, that was a brand awareness play, 100%. So now the question would be, what is that producing for them? And my thought was simply like, I drink beer. I rarely drink Sam Adams, but now I'm like, man, what a move that they just made there. It may get me next time to order a Sam Adams instead. And then second, as a social drinker, I know you're with somebody, you're buying them a drink, they'll say, hey, I'll take one of those too, right? And how many of the 1,000 people of the touch points there will do that? So I don't know the answer, but I think it's a great question that you are asking on that brand awareness side.
And I think you can do a whole segment on this because, brand awareness from my perspective, like what you just spoke about, it's the beginning of brand awareness. It now moves you through a different stage through the cycle of awareness, right? So what brand awareness was and your initial attendance at that tailgate, you as a consumer, brand awareness is not the same for you next time you see that brand. Now you're at a different level of awareness with that brand. And so you have to look at each conference to say, okay, the attendees at this event, what stage of awareness are they at in our stages? And then you build an experience from there. But I think there's always been this one size fits all when it comes to brand awareness, which is, again, big brand, big booth, slap your logo everywhere. Okay, great brand awareness. But I think we have to start to think, okay, what level of brand awareness, what stage of brand awareness are they in? And then build your experience from that.
Love what you said about levels of that, because I do know who Sam Adams is. I do know what Twisted Tea is. But now I really know, and I kind of had a great time. And I did like, you know what I mean? So no, I think that's
Have you bought either of those brands at the store since you went?
Was literally Saturday that I went, but previously, no. And I think the other piece was my mother-in-law was with me and she had, I think, too good of a time. And she was drinking those Twisted Teas. And she's like, I'm going to buy, she literally said to me, she's like, I'm going to buy these. And I was like, I think that's awesome because she's never had them. And would she have typically tried them? No. She gets a Michelob Ultra. She gets she goes right back to her thing. So interesting there. I wrote about it because it had my brain kind of turning, and I met the guy that ran the activation, and I went over to him, found him. I said, hey, this is really good. I said, congrats. It's a good activation. It's a huge undertaking.
How I see it is try it, like it, love it. And I'll wrap it up there, but try it, like it, love it, right? Brand awareness, step 1, try it. Step 2, I tried it. Now I like it. To your point, I went in the store, I bought it. Now, my third level of brand awareness is I want you to love this brand. So it's no longer a matter of you seeing the logo. You know the logo. Now I want you to understand the depth, the culture, the DNA of this brand. So that way, now you love it. So try it, like it, love it.
Got to make fans, not customers, right?
Exactly.
We have 2 questions, I think 3, but I want to get to them. So let's go. And then what I'll do is, Nancy, Jon, Tavar, if you feel like you want to answer this question, just raise your hand. All right. And then if you all have your hands raised, I'm just going to pick who I like the most and we'll go from there. Okay. So a question from Dudley. Dudley, thanks for the question. What are innovative trends or ways you all see the event industry will engage customers with experiences beyond Instagrammable photo ops? So essentially, we're talking engagement, being innovative, and sort of engaging the customer past a standard thing that most people would do. So I'd let anybody take this that would like it.
I'll take it. We just wrapped up an event 2 weeks ago. I was telling Nancy and Tavar. So we in Orlando for a CIO reception. How are we creating an experience for these C level individuals that are, they know Lenovo, but they don't know necessarily Lenovo as a leader for generative AI. And so what we did was we brought in Shaquille O'Neal as our DJ to really be the wow factor. And then the challenge I had for the team was, what is the connection here back to Lenovo? They're coming here to see Shaq, but how are we selling the experience? So what we did was we developed a 8 by 24 foot race course F1 theme because we partner with F1. And so we built this race course that really showed Lenovo's end-to-end portfolio for enterprises as a slot car race. And we had everything from hardware to services and solutions in this immersive experience. We got content from Shaq. We then used that at an internal event last week in Austin where we had the CEO of Lenovo playing that. And so from that, we created this experience at these 2 events with these individuals that we then use for social media. We have a content campaign that we pushed out last week. Got content around, what we are doing with F1 in this race course. So it kind of getting more outside of the box with here's the booth space or here's this event to, hey, I know now that Lenovo does these things as it relates to Formula One that I can then work and bring back to my enterprise.
So, John, I'm glad you jumped in because it really was excellent. I mean, just seeing the visuals of it, reading a little bit about it, with your posts and stuff, and now hearing you talk about it. So for anybody, I would go to LinkedIn, go to John's profile, and go see what he actually just kind of walked you all through. So Tavar, Nancy, I don't know if you guys have anything additional in terms of trends or ways of engaging your customers. Tavar, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I would love to see us get back into the world of mystery. And I say this because we've gotten so comfortable in this space of instant sharing, instant engagement through social media and quick access to people. But I would love to challenge our industry to kind of go back to the world of mystery where you're not able to post instantly, you're not able to share instantly. What makes me think of this type of experience is when I went to the Hard Rock to see Amy Schumer a few years ago for my birthday, and they made everyone put their phone into a little pouch so you can't take pictures or record video.
Yeah.
And it forced you to not only be present, but it also forced you to be engaged, not only with the show, but with people around you. It forced you to have conversation, not only with the people you're with, but people maybe you're not with. But it also forced you to kind of have a different level of excitement when recapping the event, right? Like there's this energy that you have where you just want to get it out because you weren't able to get it out in the moment. And it kind of frames things a little differently, and it makes you speak about the experience a little differently as well. So I'm not sure how we as events folks can introduce that into our own programs, but I'm on this whole kick lately of like small, intimate, appealing more to the introverted mindset. And how I envision it is like, breakout sessions have typically been in a meeting room with theater style chairs, the screen, and some, high chairs with a panel. How about a cool breakout session around a bonfire or something where everyone's kind of talking to one another without cell phones, without microphones, without audio visual, just having like a round table conversation. I think we need to tap more into the humanistic side of engaging and not rely so much on social media and so much on technology. And we might be surprised with what we uncover.
Nice. Those are good. We got more questions, so I'm going to keep cooking through here. We have anonymous attendee. So when it comes to stretching the dollar, which is what we were discussing earlier, how are some ways you strategically do this with the increasing labor costs with trade shows? Specifically, I'm finding that even when we try to pull back, there's huge increases year over year. So I'll let one of you take this. I would say, anonymous attendee, I do believe in exactly what you're asking for here, that this is something that companies like mine, exhibit houses, your partner, is somebody where you test your partnership, right? This is where you're going to them, and it's not the cat and mouse of the budget. It's not the cat and the mouse of give me the best design for this or them holding things. And, it's saying, hey, we need to reduce. We want to exhibit. We need to reduce. We need to get results. And it's when you start really partnering to say, how are we going to do this, right? Is everybody okay with you going from a 30 by 30 and $200,000 spend down to something different? Will somebody step up and help you and have that conversation, or will they not? And I think that is one of the first places that I think you should start, just coming from my perspective. But I'll let either Tavar, Nancy, or John go. Nancy?
Yeah, and I can speak to that a little bit. I mean, the best advice that I can offer is to control what you can control. You're not going to control material handling or AV or rigging. You're just not going to be able to negotiate those things. So really look to see what you can control. Is there something on Amazon that you can order for $25 to hang bags on in your booth versus renting a bag stand for $300? We had an incident in, not an incident, we were in Nashville in September, and an in-house AV provider wanted to charge us $10,000 to put power strips in meeting rooms. $10,000. Power strips are $11.24 because I'm very familiar with that price because I looked it up. So, we're not going to pay $10,000 for something that we could spend, $400 on or what have you. So don't just take things at face value. Look to see what the alternative is, because there's almost always an alternative out there.
And
Yeah,
I would
I'll
say
just
challenge.
sorry, Tavar.
Sorry, I was going to say challenge your vendors too. Like I've done it multiple times where they'll give me a price for something, and I'll go on Amazon and I'll find it for significantly less, and I'll send it to them and be like, listen, guys, I understand a little bit of a price increase, but this is ridiculous. Either you do right by me, or I'll just go get it on my own. So I think it's you got to kind of suck it to the vendors as well, because some of them do get a little out of hand.
And I was going to just add to that. So I attended the SEMA Summit, it's a Corporate Event Marketing Association. It took place in Salt Lake City, Utah in August. One of the things that they announced at the event was they're starting this initiative where they're trying to aggregate all of the, what did you pay for this at this venue? And they're trying to aggregate all the documents that we as event marketers can have a repository and say, okay, I'm being charged this, but this event that just took place last week, $20,000 less. And so we're trying to have this open source of data that we can really streamline. And so if Tavar or Nancy go to this event, and I've been there, and they're scrubbing all of the data, so it's not proprietary, but it's a way for us to be able to say, okay, I'm going to plan this event in Orlando or Las Vegas. Here are the hotels. Here's what would be material handling or electricity, so that we have that way that we can then, to Tavar's point, arm ourselves to go back and say, hey, this is not actual, what we should be paying. It should be at this. So just over communication and really kind of finding the tribe where, to the question, here's what we can do as event marketers. We're trying to make sure that we are kind of all having a level playing field, because we know when we go to these venues, we're being nickel and dimed, and really just having that ability to have that. So I'll share that with you, Matt, but just a way for us to kind of have that open communication.
John, it's an excellent point, right? And we had Peggy Ferguson ask, can we get access to the data John just mentioned? So John, I don't know, is that data, I assume that SEMA is building that data to create benchmarks at this point. It's not built yet, but here's what this did make me think. What it did make me think is part of the reason that we started this show, however, a year and whatever ago, was I don't feel like there really is a community or lines open for event marketers, or at least for our customers that we had spoke to. So I would encourage people, if you were on this call, if you are an event marketer, reach out to each other on LinkedIn, right? That's what it's there for. And if you have an event in Orlando, if you have an event, I mean, we were just talking for a while before we came on about Nashville. It seems that everybody's been to Nashville. We're talking about the facilities and stuff. Reach out and ask, because I can tell you this, there is stupid stuff, $10,000 for electrical strips and things like that, right? Like there is things like that going on. And if you need to double check yourself, if you have a circle of 2 or 3, 4 people, maybe they can connect you with another person that said, hey, they just did an event there. They just did a trade show at this hotel at this hall. So I would say that's something that rang my bell, John, when you were saying that, because hopefully when SEMA, and just for the chat, I see it's CEMA, not SEMA. Hopefully that benchmarking data comes out and helps all. I think it's a brilliant idea of what they're doing.
And for the record, we don't want to have to do that haggling of pricing and throwing prices in front. We don't want to have to do that. So it's so much better when the vendors just do right by us and understand that we can't afford to pay such astronomical prices for things that are not worth it.
Yeah. And Jocelyn, okay, Grace. So Jocelyn, she said, I didn't mean to send that anonymously. No worries, Jocelyn. We now know who you are. All right. So we have more questions, but I do want to continue moving down because we have stuff here. So I'm going to kind of move on, leave some of these questions, then get back to them. All right. So Nancy, you had mentioned, and I think this is a really cool topic, which is why I want to get to it. You had mentioned keeping things fresh when the old ceiling becomes the floor. I love that statement. I love the way you said it. I told you earlier, I think it's interesting because when we talk with our customers, right, we always have people saying, we want to do something different. We want to keep it fresh. We want to show up in a new way. So I want to know, can you elaborate on that either as a problem or something you've solved? And I think we can get into a discussion about how to keep things fresh.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is a problem, and it's something that we've solved from time to time, but certainly not perfectly, probably like everybody. It's a huge challenge. You're on the heels of a really great event and everybody's celebrating and so excited. And then, you have a new challenge in front of yourself of how you're going to either match or beat that. And, I think the general expectation is to beat it. You can always try to get more budget, but that's not realistic. And that only goes so far too. You have to really kind of drive and push creatively. So, a couple of examples that we've found are successful for our particular audiences. For our hosted event, so our customer event, we have leaned very, very hard into location. I'm going to bring up Nashville again because we were just there in September, and we were very Nashville at the event. We had tons of musicians. We had really great food. We utilized all of the amazing venues in Nashville. So, we took advantage of local resources and tried to provide as much of an immersive experience for our customers as possible. This same event is going to be in Southern California next year. So now we're looking at, being able to be outside and having beautiful views and nice scenery and, different kind of food and vibes. So we lean very, very hard into location. We also utilize technology. This year we had our CEO spoke about AI and the role of AI in our industry. And to kick off his speech, we had a group create a custom music piece for us done exclusively by AI. So it was a drum mashup and all this different music, and it was amazing. And it surrounded everybody in the ballroom, and it was a really cool way to kick off the conference. So think about what your speakers are going to be talking about and figure out if you can tack on an experience to that. As exhibitors, we participate in 75 events during the year. So we're constantly trying to think about how to be creative, how to do something different with giveaways and booth activities. You mentioned not just Instagrammable photographs, like how do you get people into your booth and how do you keep them there and how do they interact with your products and services? And so that to me is a work in progress and something that we're constantly talking about and evaluating. And, I'm always beating the drum of train your team how to be good exhibitors. So in a previous role, I used to manage a trade show, and we would get mighty complaints from people who would set up their booth and hope that people would come to them. They would just sit there and wait for the traffic to come, and that never works. So you have to train your team to set up meetings, to invite people to the booth, to draw them in when they're walking by. I can't tell you how frustrating it is to see somebody's back turned when people are walking by the booth. Turn around and engage people and draw them in and have a conversation with them. So I think there's so many factors that go into it, and all things that we're still working on and trying to refine.
I think that's the
Nancy,
biggest.
I think. Oh, go ahead, John.
Matt. I was going to say, I think that's
Okay.
Nancy, like that's the biggest problem for us. It's the training of the staff, because we identify the sales team to help and support the event. They get there and then they're just standing around, and it's really engage with the customer. It doesn't have to be, this deep conversation. Hey, who are you? What are your areas of problems? How can we help? Like just surface level conversations. And I think, no matter how many times that we've had it with our sales team, it's still the kind of feedback that we get was, well, we didn't engage as best we could. And so to your point you made, Nancy, I think it's kind of over communicating in the pre-planning phase where here's what we're doing, and then kind of an education on, we need you really to be an active participant in this event to really bring those conversations and ultimately the pipeline.
Yeah.
And I echo everything that they both said. All of that is definitely very important and good ways to kind of keep things fresh and exciting. But I also want to add, the little moments, think about the full end-to-end event journey. And that starts with how you promote your event, how people register, how people book appointments to meet with your sales team, what those little experiences look like as well. How do you make your event registration process a little bit better, a little bit more tech savvy, a little bit more technologically advanced? People notice those little things, and to you, it's like, oh, we just brought on board a new event management platform, but to the user, to the registrant, that's a whole new experience for them, and that in itself will make that event feel that much better. So don't forget the little things as well.
Totally.
I think a couple good things there. When you guys were touching on the idea of like how to engage on the show floor, I think Tavar brought up a good point earlier, which is sort of this like inclusivity of people out of events. Like you have introverts, you have people that will not, we've exhibited where people have not come into our booth to come talk to us, but they've reached out to us afterwards and said, right, like so I think you have to be considering all the time the effort that goes into, do you have other forms of getting in touch with people? John, Nancy both touched on pre-planning. If you think you're just going to show up and pull people out of the aisles, you're not, right? You're just not. You got to have engagement. You have to be busy. You have to look like things are going on. It's got to be this positive, smiling, face on atmosphere for people that will get the people that maybe or may not want to come in. So I really like all those points there. I think those are really, really good. Tavar and John, on the idea of keeping things fresh over time, anything else that you guys would like to add? Because obviously kind of reinventing the wheel, event to event to event, you're trying to do something bigger, better, badder. And I think I hear that from a lot of event marketers that we speak to, is they always want to do something new, right? They want to show up looking different, looking better, engaging better. Anything else you guys might recommend?
I would just say, like I said before, focus on the little things. Like, it doesn't always have to be this astronomical moment or this huge thing that, improves the experience. Focus on the little things, and also try to diversify your experiences, and not necessarily only from a lens of inclusivity. But when I say diversify your experience, it's like it starts at a booth, but do you have a hospitality lounge they can go to after the booth? Do you have an afterglow event planned outside of the conference? Like, making sure that you're accommodating as many touch points as possible outside of the norm. I think it's just, remembering the small moments, remembering the small things, and then diversifying the experience.
Nice. Melanie wrote in here, she said, I've done literal mock booth for best practices. Sounds a little overkill, but it's the only thing that got them to realize how serious it is. Melanie, I think that's great. I mean, when you talk about sales in general, I mean, role playing is one of the biggest strategies and techniques for learning how to sell, overcoming objections, having discussions with people. The one thing I would love to add onto this part about keeping things fresh is just always questioning things, right? When you get done, which is like, why did we do it this way? Did it work? I really like what you said, Tavar, about the little things, the details, the extras. Like, are you nailing those little pieces for people? But I would say my 30,000 foot answer on something like that would be question the stuff that you're doing. Because if you question yourself, you could be like, that was excellent. Like that crushed, like that piece of it was amazing. You just keep plowing, right? Keep going with that. But where are the areas that you're like, I don't know if that really worked, or that, that could be different. Maybe we should try this. And I think that gets your brain kind of turning in a direction to insert different things in areas and make things better. So, all right, I want to get to another question because they're coming in here. So question is from Pratik, and I apologize if I did not pronounce that correctly, but the question is, tell us something about corporate event culture. I think it's an interesting question. I would love to, it's just simple. It's tell us something about corporate event culture.
Ooh, it's a broad question. It's a very broad question. It's not for everybody. I'll tell you that much. It's not for everybody. I think people are trying to figure out how can they continue to do something that they love while also continuing to have a life. I mean, that's just the truth. Corporate event culture is very demanding. And so I think a lot of us are, COVID has brought awareness to work-life balance in a way that I think none of us have ever experienced before. And so I think a lot of us corporate events folks are now saying, okay, before COVID, it was fine to be 200% committed to your job and, do it sun up to sundown and have no life. But I don't know if that's what I want anymore. And so I think a lot of corporate events people are starting to ask themselves, like, how do I find that balance between doing what I love, which are corporate events, but also falling in line with this new work-life balance world, which is very important to me. So that's that. I think that's something that a lot of us are asking ourselves. And it's a fair question.
Yeah, that's a good one there. Project also asked, how can LinkedIn help in event marketing? And I think I sort of got to this a little bit earlier, we were saying, which is you should be reaching out to other event marketers, people that are doing your job and different, I don't know how close people are with their, main competitors and people like that, but there's other people in different industries and things. I would use LinkedIn that way because I think there is a need for peer-to-peer discussion. There is a need to understand, what are you doing differently? How can I think differently? Or, hey, I did this, like Jon broke down his whole engagement at their show, which is honestly exceptional. You should go look at it. And if I was an event marketer, I might call Jon and be like, hey, Jon, how did you pull that off? Right? Because maybe you won't do the same thing, but you'll do something in step with that. And if you understand how Jon did it, you must have an easier time of doing that. That's how I would use LinkedIn. You know, Nancy, Jon, Tavar, I don't know how you guys use LinkedIn or not.
I was going to say I'm a huge believer in LinkedIn. I mean, attending SEMA, I got with our competitors in the industry and kind of met with them, and I'm saying in connection with them, not necessarily talk, nuts and bolts or, secret sauce of what we're doing, but hey, what's working for you and how are we staying connected to Matt's point? I mean, I think it's the more information that we have, the bigger the tribe is. Yep. It allows for really these deeper conversations on maybe, okay, well, I didn't think about it like that, but now that I see the connections that I have made, here's what we could do differently.
Yeah. And if anybody needs any connections, I mean, we have made some really strong connections. I think we've spoken to a lot of people. And if anybody ever wants to talk to anybody that was either on our show or, I mean, I would gladly go ask them and make a connection. I'm not just going to, throw people around, but I will ask and see. So it's, anybody on here has our contact information. You can utilize us. You can utilize this show if ever needed to want to talk to somebody about anything that they did or it's information or you're doing a show somewhere. I mean, we would be glad to do that. Okay. Question from Cody here. Cody, I think this is a really good question. I want to get to it. As leaders in the industry, there's a lot of pressure to be ahead of the game and thinking outside the box. How and where do you spend your time and energy for inspiration, education, and personal growth so you are always innovating?
Believe it or not, LinkedIn is very inspirational if you're following the right people and if you have access to the right network. So I would definitely say, leverage LinkedIn. I'm on Event Marketer a lot. That's one of the tools and resources that I frequent. And then, of course, any of the industry organizations that you may trust. And the reason I say the ones that you may trust is I think everyone gets something different out of all of them. But just find the 2 or 3 that you really trust and that you're really comfortable with, and use those networks. I also think that events folks at the core of who we are, no matter how analytical or data driven we are, we're still creative people. And in order for us to get our creative juices flowing, we have to get out there. And when I say get out there, I mean planes, trains, and automobiles. So, one of the things that I missed during COVID that really stunted my creativity was not being able to go to any industry events. So even if it's one big one a year, whether it be IMEX or whatever the case may be, just get out there and see how things are being done. You'll be surprised with how inspired you come back, ready to get to work and ready to do things. So those are my suggestions.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Tavar. Just getting out there and seeing other events. I mean, even when we're at trade shows, I'll walk around and take, look at what other people are doing, look at what giveaways they have, look at what they've got going on. And sometimes I'll find their events person and introduce myself and just kind of chat through things a little bit. I totally agree on industry events. I haven't had the luxury to be able to go to any in recent time, but I am going to one a little bit later this month, which I'm very excited about. So just seeing how other people do things and seeing how you can get inspiration from that, whether it's in person or through through LinkedIn or whatever other resources you have, but be open to evaluating what others are doing.
And kind of do things that you like as well. Like, for example, I like cars. And so while it may not fall in my industry or fall within my realm of work, I go to auto shows whenever I can. But naturally, as an events person and as a marketer, I'm looking at the event from that lens, and I become inspired with how they run it, how they do it, how they make the flow, everything. So, also just kind of keep that eye open when you're going to things in your day to day.
Nice. All right, let's go to the part 2 here as we're rolling through, which is kind of like, biggest obstacles, biggest goals to get to the next level, a little bit of career path here, right? So Nancy, you recently got a promotion. So congratulations. That's amazing. Promotion as Director of Global Event Marketing, right? And you had said that you were looking to establish yourself as a strategic partner instead of a support person and build an executive presence, which I think is such a cool thing to say. A little bit of a mindset, right? A little bit how you're walking into that. This has been a key to your success. Like how have you approached doing that? Because I think that'd be really helpful for anybody on this call that's maybe whether they're starting out or whether they're in the on their path.
Yeah. So I think it's really important for us to establish ourselves as strategic partners. It's very easy to get into a little bit of an order taking mindset because we work with so many other stakeholders who have their ideas and opinions and feedback, which I want, But it's also important for me, for my team, to guide them, to guide the conversations, to guide the event, instead of just checking the box and checking the to-do list. So I think it's very important that we understand the strategy behind the events, not just the marketing team, not just the sales team, but that we're really bought into the strategy, and that we speak up during these planning meetings and, kind of turn it back to the strategy. So shift the conversation towards the strategy and really be a leader in the conversation. Come to meetings with ideas and be active and engaged. And some of this is really basic, but I think it's important to remember that that people look to us to drive that. I also think it's really important to get to know other people who do this well and reach out to them and ask for their advice. I used to call a former colleague all the time to kind of chat through events with him, even long after we stopped working together. And his voice is in my head all the time for, when I'm trying to make decisions and trying to move things forward. So I think it's important to seek the advice of others and, really work with the team to prop yourself up to make that next step in your career. We are all experts in our field. We're experts in events. And so just make sure that you make that known and that you make your voice heard with the rest of your team.
Nancy, I love kind of how you rolled through that. I think something about asking those questions, about having that strategic conversation is, larger companies you have marketing, you have sales, you have go-to-market, you have events, you have all these departments, right? And the event side of things, I think you want people like yourselves involved in those high-level conversations from an event side, questioning the strategy, I don't remember who said it earlier. They were talking to somebody from sales about getting rid of an event. It doesn't work. It's not driving, the right kind of, so those conversations are huge. And I always say this on the show. I encourage any event marketer, whether it's your first year, 20th year, ask the right questions. Understand, why are we doing this? What are the results? What are the objectives? How are we tying this to success? I think those are really just excellent questions. They get you noticed. They get you into better conversations with people at your organization, for sure. Jon, you had said on this, you had mentioned wanting more strategy and more knowledge of the portfolio, right? Which I think is such a good thing to say. Just give us a little bit on that.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what Nancy was saying was about the, moving from executioner to strategy, and what is our business of goal? What is that holistic, larger picture that we need to be road mapping for the year, and how does that tie into what we are looking to do from an industry to an internal event? And so having the ability to build the team, because we're a team of two, where we both are executioners, but we can at least start discussing and having a roadmap for the next year, because really our plan for 25 or 24, starts next month. And so that's kind of where we're going into this, winter planning, where here's the strategy, here's our business objectives. Let's marry them together to figure out which events work for us, and ultimately how does that meet the objectives for the company.
That's great. All right, we're pushing up on time here, but I do want to get to this last piece, because Tavar said something interesting when we were talking previously. We had asked all three of you, like, what do you wish existed as a resource for you, which I think was a cool question. Tavar, talk to me about the value of getting involved in organizations, networks. We had mentioned earlier a bit of peer-to-peer, right? You had mentioned fireside chat, peer-to-peer. What do you think is there, from educational resources, events that people should attend, peer-to-peer relationships? What are you either seeking, been a part of, that you could recommend to people? Anything?
Yeah, I'm always looking for a safe space for us. And it's I love our vendors and our service providers, and I think it's important to have those opportunities to collaborate with them and make sure that there's an equal perspective. But I also am very, very eager for spaces where I can just be among event pros and we can just hash it out about anything and everything. It's very important that we have safe spaces where we can do that without feeling like we're going to be solicited or sold to, or asked a ton of questions about our portfolio of events. And so while I know that there's some organizations out there that exist that do this well, I'm eager to find an organization that really sticks to that, but also can be a voice of our industry outside of our industry, right? So when you think of the, different administrations of travel and tourism, and when they're looking for the, subject matter experts to speak on the future of travel and what events do for the country and how we contribute to the country and all those things, I think it's about time that we have a cohort of people that can speak on behalf of just event planners. Maybe this exists and I just don't know it, but if you're asking me what is something that I would love to see in our network, that's one thing I would love to see. Is just a trusted, safe space of event pros where we can hash it out and talk about anything and everything.
There was a question about events as well. I know, Tavar, you spoke at SEMA. Jon, I believe you said you went to SEMA this year.
I spoken, attended for the first time. Yep.
Awesome. That's great. So, for people asking in a question where to go, so SEMA might be a good one, right? If the two of them are going and they spoke at it, right?
Yeah.
Any others?
SEMA's a good one. And there's another one that I don't think a lot of people know about, but it's a little bit more for my community, but it's the National Coalition of Black Meeting Planners. They have an annual event in December in Atlanta, and that's an organization that I've joined recently that I find to be very, very rewarding. And there's others. There's a ton of them out there, but that's another thing that kind of, it's like a double-edged sword, right? Because there's so many and there's so many opportunities to be part of these awesome communities, but then there are so many that it's kind of hard to choose which ones you really want to be part of. So, I suggest people just do their research, find whichever ones align with your morals, your values, which ones you feel most comfortable, most safe, and, participate as much as you can.
Jon, Nancy, any events that you guys have either been to or on that side of like resources and, peer-to-peer, anything like that that's worked for you?
So I attended Exhibitor Live in Vegas to kind of get the way back when I first started about just the industry knowledge. And then again, this year was SEMA, just because I hadn't been to a more professional development conference, wanted to kind of see what like-minded individuals were there. So for me, Exhibitor Live, to Tavar's comment, it's based on what you're trying to obtain from that. And then for SEMA this year, for kind of what's resonating across corporate event marketers and then the agencies.
Awesome.
If I can also make one last suggestion, sorry, Matt.
Yeah,
try to attend international events as well. IMEX is amazing, but I've told everyone through and through, I like IMEX Frankfurt. That's actually the one I prefer.
Yeah.
So I challenge everyone, yes, do our national events, but if you can get to one international event, it's a completely different perspective depending on which one you go to. So
that's a great
Nancy,
point, because planning an international event is much different than planning one in the US. So that's a fantastic point to, experience an international event as well if you can. That's fantastic advice.
Good throw in there, Tavar, at the end. I think that's great. Get a little international travel out of it. No big, that's always good for people. So, all right, we have a hard stop at 2. We like to keep this to an hour. Nancy, Tavar, Jon, that was awesome. Great conversation. I appreciate you guys. Really glad to have you here. Everybody that showed up, thank you so much. We had awesome attendance today. Really good questions. I feel like I could have done this for another 2 hours, to be honest with you. Good stuff. Nancy, Tavar, Jon, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. This was a blast.
Thank you. This was great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This was awesome.
Awesome. Thanks for being here as always. And we will see you next time. Thank you all so much.